Hey guys, Lumen02, doing another recording with this vintage Jeskai or blue-white splash red control deck. No significant changes to the deck itself, but I wanted to have it up just for your processing in case you missed the earlier video in which I ran this deck through a league. The purpose of today's video is going to be to actually analyze one single game, and it's a big blue mirror match between this deck and another blue deck. And I kind of wanted to go through it and showcase how I think decision cycle is very important to the deck's profitable play, and show where a few things probably could have been done differently to change the outcome of a game, or at least the highest probability of a favorable outcome for the game. So I'm going to go on a quick pause and we'll jump into our game one against another big blue deck in vid. Alright guys, so we are playing against player Vane Goretzky, which I guess it's an ode to the professional NHL player, which is cool. I'm a Detroit person, and at least I was born that way. So, Gitaxian Probe, going and taking a look at our hand. Great card, obviously restricted for a reason, mostly because of its applications to Storm and its ability just to essentially be a free card in any deck. The cost of life. So they get to see our hand. Our hand is not exceptional, but I think this is a keepable hand in the dark. I don't know what I'm playing at this point in time against player Vane Goretzky. I don't know this player. So they at least know that if they're on some sort of Storm deck or some sort of like fast combo deck, they can win on turn one. They're able to win this turn, so they know that now. They get to take a look at our hand. They cast a Sensei's Divining Top out, and I say, okay, well, maybe we're losing this turn. Now, this is where the game gets interesting. I go ahead and Gitaxian Probe here to see what they're up to. What they end up doing is mental misstepping my Gitaxian Probe. In a lot of ways, mental misstepping Gitaxian Probe is a gambit. I'm not generally a fan of it, but them mental misstepping my Gitaxian Probe tells me just as much about their hand as if they had not Gitaxian Probed. If they had a fast combo deck, they would have won last turn. Maybe they're like one piece off, but I don't believe that. I think right now they have a bad hand, and they're hoping that Sensei's Divining Top can help draw them out of it. So their choice there to mental misstep the Gitaxian Probe I think was poor, because they knew the contents of my hand, and they know that I'm not reacting to anything. And what they've essentially traded off is they kept me in the dark as far as their hand's contents, unless I'm a good enough player to, generally speaking, understand that their hand's just not good. If they're going to mental misstep that, they just don't want me to see it. But what they are giving up is my ability to look at possibly up to 3 cards. Well, 2 cards. Well, 1 from draw, 2 off Preordain, and ostensibly a 3rd in the blind off Preordain if I don't like the top 2. So I'm going to be able to probably find an answer here to anything I need, or a way to turn the tide of the game. So I go ahead and Polluted Delta here. After I get my Gitaxian Probe countered, I find a Scalding Tarn and a Force of Will. This hand has plenty of land, so I take the Force of Will to stop any broken shenanigans on their turn. They go ahead and top here. They find what they were looking for, which in this case is Ancestral Recall. I do Force of Will this because I think they're on Bupkiss in hand. I don't think they're going to be able to stop that, and if they do, it's going to be at the cost of 2 cards more than likely. I go ahead and just slam the Monastery Mentor because if they have a Force of Will, I want them to pitch cards. If they don't have a Force of Will, I want them to have to deal with this and play to my pace. They play on a Dak Faden, which, is going to steal my Sapphire, but that's not really a big deal. I don't really need fast mana outside of allowing me to turbo out that Monastery Mentor. One of the plays that I could have made differently this game is played my Sapphire out turn 1, but that could have been volley as well. If they had Dak Faden plus any ramp, they were going to steal it, and I really wanted it specifically for the turn that I turboed out the Mentor. It is better against like the draw 7s though. As you see, we take a pretty firm lead. That mental misstep would have been a lot better against a Brainstorm and or Preordain. I think Preordain was the card they really wanted to mental misstep. I do end up keeping the mental misstep that I see off the top with my Brainstorm and shuffle away the bolts and the rest, because I think anything that's going to get them out of this is going to basically be like Lightning Bolt or Swords to Plowshares if they're playing white. I go ahead and mental misstep their Brainstorm here, putting me pretty well in the lead. Put a Scalding Tarn into the graveyard, flip, find a bolt their face down to 12, and then put them effectively to 3 life and say, hey, have it or die. And it doesn't look like they're a fast kind of deck. So they play on the top, look with the top, sack, fetch, look, they don't find what they need. So Monastery Mentor ends up getting it done. But I do think this game could have been played significantly different on my opponent's part. Their use of mental misstep on my Gitaxian Probe, I think, was a weaker use of it. And I think, honestly, it kind of... So, there's a couple ways you can look at it. Like, if their hand is just solid gas, and, like, they know they can win on the next turn, maybe then you do it because you're trying to next level me into thinking you have a garbage hand. But I think what they should, I don't know if they did this or not, but I think very clearly what that play to me shows, at least when they mental misstep a Gataxian Probe, is that they have garbage in hand. That said, I think they still want to wait to get my Preordain. I think Preordain is a much higher upside card than Gataxian Probe is, especially if you're going to give away the same hidden information without giving it away, quote unquote. So I do think this game was played, or could have been played significantly different by my opponent. It's not to say we still wouldn't have won. We had a decent enough hand in the blue mirror match. But we would have dredged a lot of cards on if they had like the Force of Will and stuff like that. Just with Monastery Mentor, it's generally a must counter, and if I'm getting 2 cards from my Monastery Mentor, I tend to be fine with that, as long as I'm just grinding them down on resources. And if I'm not, well, if I resolve it, well, then I'm probably just going to win with it, like you see here. It doesn't matter how many cards they draw with Dig Through Time and Brainstorm, etc. They're just going to die to the Monastery Mentor unless they can deal with the board, which, typically speaking, these blue decks will have a much easier time dealing with the stack than they will with the board, so if you get the board going, you can generally win with it. Alright, we'll go on to the next game, which is a little more contested. I think we won this one quite handily, but I do think that decision was interesting on their part, and I do think it allowed me to get significantly ahead by finding the Force of Will for their Ancestral. As typically, I do think that in these sort of games, the Blue Mirrors, whoever resolves Ancestral first has got to be like about a 70% to win. 70% over their opponent to win because it's so many cards. And these decks do rely on utilization of a lot of resources to operate effectively in the control war. All right, be back momentarily, guys, for Game 2. Alright guys, back for Game 2. This first hand was enticing because it has Ancestral Recall and it has one colored mana source in a Mox Ruby, but it's not keepable. I'm not that greedy. This hand is keepable. It's got a Preordain to help smooth out the draw. We're on the smooth out the draw. We are on the draw, which means that we have another look at a land here. I believe I end up seeing... Oop, I'm pushing keep like I'm playing this again. We see a Time Walk bottom it. Time Walk's not what we need right now. We're just looking for land. Find a Brainstorm. So if we get Metal Misstep on this Preordain, then I think we're going to be fine. I'm going to save the Brainstorm for a little later. It's a little more powerful. I bottom both of the non-land cards and top into a Mental Misstep. So my opponent now, if they're watching my log, knows that I am attempting to find land, more than likely. They Ancestral Recall in response. I Mental Misstep this. They Mental Misstep in response. Their Ancestral Recall resolves, which means, again, like I was saying, I'm probably not very likely to win this game at this point because they're just up so far on cards. But actually, we're currently at card parity. They Gataxian Probe here, and don't play an additional land, which is interesting to me. I know my top card is a non-land card. I believe it was another Dak Faden. So I just go ahead and shuffle my library and put the Ancestral Recall in my hand. They find a Library of Alexandria, which is disheartening because that card is very tough to beat in the mirror. But I do have a Strip Mine in play, although I'm kind of loath at this point to utilize it to find some extra cards. What I end up doing here is I just strip their library and I end up playing a Time Walk. They end up countering my Time Walk with Mana Drain, which I'm very happy to have happen. I'm not going to Force of Will that. Right now, I'm just kind of trying to dredge the resources out of their hand after they've resolved an Ancestral Recall and also gotten an activation off of Loa. I do go ahead and Force of Will the Yawgmoth's Will, which I'm lucky to see does not resolve. That was obviously a bait to get my my Force of Will out of hand. At this point, I just want to dredge more resources out of their hand, so I just play the Monastery Mentor. I'm not trying to get my Ancestral Recall countered. I do think Ancestral Recall is the way that I get back into this game if it is possible for me to win it. I still get a 2-for-1, basically Lotus plus Force of Will to counter my Monastery Mentor, which tends to be okay with me. They have Scrubland. They end up playing a Cannonball, but they're down to 0 cards, and they're looking with Sensei's Divining Top. They go ahead and flip top and play on a Time Vault. Not really what I would consider a very high upside play, unless they know that they have in the top 2 cards below top a key. I'm not going to put them on key. I don't know they have key, so I just go ahead and the most mana efficient that I can be, get my Search for Azcanta down, and also resolve my Ancestral Recall. I put the Preordained into the graveyard to flip here, cast out the Snapcaster Mage. It also has to do with mana efficiency. I want to have access to as much counter magic as I can on their turn, just in case they do find an answer or a way to win, i.e., Voltaic Key or an answer to my board state. They go ahead and top again, flip top, find a Tolarian Academy. Their use of top is kind of odd here. I think they're kind of using it incorrectly. I don't really think they need more mana right now. What they really need is more ways to win, and they don't need to tie up their mana resource, to a greater extent than is necessary on the following turn. I go ahead and ice the Tolarian Academy just to get deeper in my deck. Plus, I knew off of Preordain that I had a Pyroblast on top, which I actually don't mind having. The problem I run into right here is I actually don't legitimately have a way to stop Voltaic Key. I have a way to stop a lot of draw cards, a lot of blue nonsense, but I don't have a way to actually draw. So I just get rid of the Time Vault because I figure it's probably the only way they can win. If they have another Cam Ball, well, oh well. I'm gonna pay the price for being greedy and flipping the Time Vault back into their deck. But I think the chances that they are going to blind flip into an answer at this point, just based on their use of top previously, is exceedingly low. And, if they're just going to sit there and draw, at least the next 2 to 3 cards are just blanks, then Teferi's just going to take over the game, and I'm going to end up winning. So, a couple interesting sets of games. I think our opponent's use of counter magic and use of so they baited with Yawgmoth's Will, but just didn't have anything, to really benefit off of that. They forced, my Monastery Mentor, but allowed the Ancestral to resolve. This matchup, I think, always will come down to card advantage. It can. Card advantage or just, breaking board parity. So, the best thing you can generally do when an opponent has an operating Library of Alexandria on the board and you do not, and you don't have a strip mine available, is just to apply pressure, right? Because that forces them out of it. It's like when they resolve the Dig Through Time and I already had a Mentor with, multiple tokens in play. If they don't have a sweeper, they're probably still going to lose there, despite how many cards they have. But accepting that the board is a non-issue, let's just say it is a non-issue, because typically speaking, the blue decks are going to not really fight on that axis. They can, but typically speaking, their card volume, the depth of cards that they have that allow them to do that is pretty low. Typically speaking, you're looking to fight on the stack. Fighting on the stack is very extensive in card requirements and mana resources. I think that if you look at this game and you go through how they utilize their mana drain and their force of will, to help control. They utilized it against the wrong resources. We were able to get a Time Walk countered, and we were able to get a Monastery Mentor Force of Will. It's still at a 2-for-1 rate off Black Lotus plus Force of Will, which allowed us to pave the way from a very early set of known hidden information or just known information that I had Ancestral Recall to ensure that my Ancestral Recall would resolve. Allowing my Ancestral Recall to resolve basically just turned this game into a rout because I was able to resolve it. Now they were able to as well, but it comes down to how they utilize the resources as well, because I think they had the resources to win this game. I don't think I should have won this. I think I very easily should have lost if they resolved an Ancestral and got one free card off of Library of Alexandria and had a vast mana advantage. We got very lucky to find the Lightning Bolt. But we are still running 2 in the deck. I took out a few other cards as opposed to those because I figured there was a good chance they were on Mentor, and I wanted to have 1 to 2 answers, maybe 3 answers with Fire Ice to answer an opposing Mentor. As it turned out, they have Cabal as opposed to Mentor, or possibly in addition to Mentor. So it ended up being a decent call. That all said, I think this matchup does a lot of times come down to decision making, and I think in both of these games we can see from our opponent's perspective that there were a lot of different decisions they could have possibly made in the game that are not per se decisions that would have won them the game, but I think would have increased their chances of winning drastically had they been played a little bit differently. All right, guys, this is just some more vintage content. Really, it's more on decision cycle and playing control mirrors. Just some of my takes on how the matchup is, I think, generally won. I'm by no means, the best expert in control mirrors, but I've had a decent track record with them, and I did well with this deck a couple days back, and wanted to kind of share why I think this is just a great deck, or these kind of matches are great matches for developing skill and understanding of evaluation and value of independent cards inside Vintage, or really any other format where you're playing a game that involves exchange of hidden information and resources as opposed to onboard interaction. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed, and take care now.